All right, how you doing? I'm sorry, man. It
No
wasn't
worries.
on my calendar. I was so excited. I had a free afternoon.
Well, I'm
I was
glad you
gonna,
have a free
I was
afternoon. You
gonna,
could take care of something.
yeah. No, I apologize. I actually don't have a free afternoon. I had my day planned, but I didn't see this on the calendar. So
Well, it's
my
all
fault.
good. Sorry to kind of take you away from your schedule, but we'll make it good and quick. We'll get
Hey,
everything.
take your time. Love talking about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Where are you right now? LA?
No, I live on the Jersey Shore.
Oh, okay. Well, how's
I'm
everything
from
out in
Long
the Jersey?
Island.
How's
Jersey
everything out
Shore.
in the East Coast there?
Jersey Shore, beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's the leaves are starting to
Yes.
change. I live on, near the water, so it's still fairly warm. You can do like a 65, 70-degree day, and it's nice.
Yeah,
It's not that.
I'm in Chicago, so I got you on the leaves and everything. It's all happening out here, but it's a cold wave hitting right now, so might be changing soon for you guys heading down to the East Coast. The weather.
It's always like a day after you guys will
Yep,
get your.
yep. Well, I'm glad I get some chance and opportunity to talk to you. I'm fascinated about it. I have so many questions, as I was telling Margaret about this film. First of all, I mean, this is like you are fully involved. This is like your baby of a project all around. Tell me the desire for doing this and making this happen. When did it kind of come about for you that you were really going to go full force and make this documentary happen? Kind of the inception of it, if you could maybe start with that.
Sure. Harry came to my high school when I was in 1974. I was a junior in high school, and he played a concert mixed with the best lecture you ever had in your life. If you think about your college lectures or anything you had in high school, this was beyond that. And he talked about hunger and poverty, and certainly living and growing up in New York. I grew up in the town next to where Harry was living at the time,
Wow.
and sandwiched between the other side was Billy Joel. So it was where Billy Joel grew up, and it was my town, Plainview, and then Harry's town, Huntington. So I was sandwiched between these two amazing artists. So I was a fan. My musical taste at the time was more The Who, Allman Brothers Band, that kind of. Bruce Springsteen came out in '75, but my girlfriend loved Harry, and but after that time he came to our high school. It kind of blew me away, and so fast forward for you. I'll fast forward to the late 1990s, and I was working with another music artist doing documentaries and stuff by the name of Carl Perkins, and Carl was one of these guys that was a lot like Harry in a way, even more so in some ways. Didn't give away all his money at all, but and I heard the Hungerthon, Harry's Hungerthon, on the air in living here in New York, and we offered an autographed pair of blue suede shoes from Carl Perkins, my partner, and they auctioned it off, and it was like one of the highest selling items ever. And I became friends with Bill Ayers, and you can fast forward to 2.5 years ago. I was interviewing Bill for another documentary of mine, and said, "Hey, Bill, how come no one's ever done a documentary on you and Harry?" And he said, "I don't know. Why don't you do it?" So I went back. I think this is now answering your question, but I wanted
Yes, but I like the story leading up to it. It all fits in.
Yeah, you'll understand it better. And I went back and I, wrote a treatment. It took me about 3 or 4 months to really write out what do I want out of this. Harry is just so prolific, and where do you choose? You got to make it 93 minutes. It turned out to be, and I wrote the treatment, and pretty much what you see on screen is what that original treatment was.
Wow.
Introduced to Sandy Chapin and Jason Chapin, and Jason became a partner on the film, and they didn't see it until recently. They had zero input as far as they liked my original treatment, And the only thing she wanted was for us to give away, a good portion of the proceeds from this film to the Harris charities.
Wow.
Sorry for the long answer, by the
No,
way.
no, that's fascinating. There's so many things I can pluck away from that. I
No,
was gonna ask you too about their involvement in it, but it's fascinating to me that they didn't see it until recently, but they really trusted you with the project to completely, do your thing with it, which says a lot in itself right there for them to put in complete trust. Because sometimes
yeah,
these kind of projects are micromanaged by the people, by the relatives that are alive still, but for that says a lot really, for them to allow you to make your own and trust you kind of in a sense from the outside to do it justice. Wow.
yeah. Well, um, we really connected that first time that Sandy and I had met. I by that point, I had become really good friends with Bill Ayers, and I produced a Hungerthon concert for him that turned out to be a concert for the families of 9/11 with Bruce Springsteen and John Bon Jovi and a whole bunch of people, and became really involved in what they do, the work that he and Harry had created. So, Sandy and I and my partner SA, we just all hit it off, and we interviewed Sandy that first day. We didn't even sign anything,
Wow.
and we weren't planning on it. And she doesn't like to be interviewed, and so she interviewed with us, and that's the Sandy you see in the film.
Unbelievable. The thing about Harry is that, I'd say I'm a casual music fan. I'm not that much of a historian, but when you watch this film, his legacy just builds in front of your eyes, and for someone that I recognize his music, but I didn't recognize the person, being kind of a casual film, music fan, going back even to the past. It makes me wonder watching this movie with the impact he had, why isn't he in the same breath as like a Bruce Springsteen or a Billy Joel, someone that kind of rolls off the tongue for any sort of, even with the least of musical knowledge? I would imagine Harry would be in that, like considering his accomplishments and how he was revered. It was unbelievable for me to witness that and what he's done. Why do you think that he doesn't kind of come up in the first breath of these iconic musicians in a sense where he definitely should be? And if you look at his peers and colleagues, they would completely expect that too, it seems like.
Well, he would have been. I think, obviously the early death didn't help, and
Mm-hmm.
both Bill and Bruce are alive, and they've continued their careers. Um, with Harry was, you know, towards the end of his life, he was really torn between his humanitarian work and his music career. Although his last few albums, I think he did 10 albums. I should know this. I forget. There's
Was it
some
11 albums in like 9 years or something?
album in 10 years. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
that's right. Because he started in his first album was in 71. So it's
Mm-hmm.
10 years. And some of his last albums were great. But Harry had his own style, right? So he was different. He had the cello. He had John Wallace with the voice, he added the drums. His shows were fantastic, equal to anybody, a Springsteen or whatever. So he had it all. He just, you know, he just died too young, and I think he would be considered in that realm.
Mm,
Plus
that,
plus the diversion. I think we can get into this more, but one of the last questions that we asked everyone is, what do you think Harry would be doing today?
right.
And, some of his family members said, well, he'd be running for Senate, or he would have already ran for Senate, because I think he was thinking about that. Other people said that he probably would have been doing documentaries, going back to documentaries, since that's what he did, that started his career. But it's he was very much in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we everyone had different answers. Our favorite was Tom, who said, his brother Tom, who said, I don't know, but whatever it is, he'd be in the middle of it. And that sums it up. That sums up when in doubt, do something, right?
Yeah.
That's what doing? And we have our own answer for that. We can talk about at the end of this conversation.
Interesting.
But,
Yeah, I'll get back to it because I have thoughts too on that sense. You know,
yeah.
it just seems that in a lot of ways too, a lot of these iconic figures when we look at, and especially when you can say someone like an Elvis or even Marilyn Monroe, or even actors like they die before you see a full life of them. Did you think about when you were making this movie about legacy too, and in a sense dying young and in such a tragic way? Does it maybe in a sense encase does it almost make his achievements in a short span of lifetime bigger
Yeah.
as he potentially lived longer, because here's someone that was reaching higher and higher and never
Yeah.
got to fully fulfill it in that lifespan. We look at these figures as in a sense as iconic in a way too because
Right.
of their short lifespan. How do you view Harry in that essence, kind of in comparison to like an Elvis in just his realm of how he was doing things?
Well, let's put it into perspective, right? We have a pandemic going on in the country. Do you know who's on the front lines of that pandemic? The two organizations he created, Why Hunger in 1975 and Long Island Cares, and the Harry Chapin Foundation, all the things he created with his wife Sandy and with Bill, that today are saving millions and millions of lives. So now he accomplished that on the humanitarian side, and Why Hunger and all this, and being on the presidential commission, and he was the most effective guy in Washington maybe ever. That's the other thing about Harry, right? Because he was larger than life. He walked into the room and he commanded that room and people loved him. So I think that when you talk about legacy, and that's the thing that drew us to this film, is that Cats in the Cradle, Taxi to a certain extent, are, particularly Cats in the Cradle, are musically in our pop culture today. So musically you have it. And then from the standpoint of his humanitarian work, and his life was, cut short. But if you look at what happened after that, and that it continued, and that every year they're saving lives and feeding people and getting them jobs and doing all this, that's like from 1975 when they started it until 81 when he died. Think about that. Here we are in
That's
2020.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
What I was thinking too, in a sense, was that what kind of, because there's moments in people's lives that spur you upon wanting to contribute to society or have that drive to do it. Did you get from these conversations with his family members and friends and people who knew him, what was his initial drive that really motivated him to be this individual, not just be a musician and trying to do it through a power of music, but literally going out there and trying to change lives and make humanity better? What was it maybe in his childhood or something? Was there a moment in his life that spurred him upon being such a humanitarian and wanting to change the world? Was there an event that really sparked him? I'm curious about that.
Well, I would say his entire childhood. They didn't have money, right? But they grew up with such love and talent in that family. If you look at his grandfathers on either side, one was a famous painter. The other was a philosopher of his time that is unbelievably brilliant, considered to be the most brilliant man in the world at that time. Wow. So his childhood, despite not having money, which that hits him right as he gets older. But what really I think got him to focus on hunger and poverty was he did a documentary in Ethiopia. So he came back from Ethiopia, and then, Bill Ayers, who was a priest at the time, and Sandy, they all got together with a few other people and said, what's the one thing that you want to do for the rest of your life that can change the world? and they settled on hunger and poverty because Harry saw it. He lived it as a child. Not, they had food on the table, but they lived bare bones, right? So you tend to, relate to that, and yeah. So I think that's what drove them. That's my opinion. I mean, after speaking to family members and really understanding, I think we explained that a little bit in there. We try to explain, they weren't rich, but boy, these people that came to Andover, New Jersey, where they spent their summers, were amazing people. So he was surrounded by a lot of brilliance, and he was brilliant.
Richness in life experience and just mind, that's what he was surrounded by.
Exactly. And Sandy Chapin is on her own. She went to Harvard. She, went to Columbia. She was a brilliant woman on her own. So the two of them were really powerful, during those times.
Well, tell me about their connection, because it's such an interesting story. Did you give her music lessons, right?
Yeah,
and it turned into like a romance. I mean, you can't listen. I'm trying to find a girlfriend with all my wilts and everything I can, and here he is. I mean, what kind of a magnetic personality and a person you have to be to kind of have this sort of romantic storybook, of a story, and it just. Tell me about what you kind of learned from her about that. I just think it's phenomenal to hear that. It's like, wow, that's what movies and books are made of.
It's so funny because she, we really wanted to view what was it like, when we interviewed Sandy that first day. And you see it in the movie, but she's got like this sly laugh after what she says about it. Like, yeah, he romanced me. He took me to, it was Tad Steaks or one of the steakhouses. If you grew up in New York back then, you can get a steak for $1. Literally, it was $1 steaks. It was like the one before Tad's. I forget it. We have it in the movie, and we found the photo of it, from those years, which was amazing. But, come on, if you can play the guitar and you have his charisma, and it's easy to pick up women, I guess. But women, would love that for sure. Something I didn't have.
But there's something about a person like that, because then you see all these subjects you interviewed. I mean, these are like icons of the industry in so many ways, and it's such an admiration for him. Tell me what that was like, just interviewing having these greats, all-time greats, and having such reverence for him. What did you kind of learn from these interviews and individual interaction, whether it be Pat Benatar, the DMC, Billy Joel? I mean, you had the who's who, and what did you take away from their kind of
I'll preface this by saying that every interview that we had, like one after the other, I would turn to my partner, S.A. Barron, and say, wow, that's the best interview for the movie. That's a great interview. And then when you get into editing and you look at the full interviews and you go, wow, we can make a movie out of that interview. You couldn't find, people to say anything bad about Harry.
Wow.
It wasn't, not that we were looking for that, what was your relationship like with Harry? It's really, and Billy Joel was amazing because, they were friends, they were personal friends, and, family members didn't know how close they were until that Billy Joel interview. And, that he launched, helped launch Billy's career. And, you hear those things, they're just amazing. Each interview was amazing.
That's unbelievable. When you see the impact, that he had on these iconic people too. It's tough in life to go and find someone where you have nothing bad to say about it, at all. I mean, that just shows about a quality of a human being.
It doesn't mean he was perfect. I mean, that's the one thing we point out in the film. It's, he had, he lived some of the rock and roll lifestyle, but he wasn't addicted to drugs. He wasn't addicted to alcohol. He was addicted to giving his money away. And he was in a hurry to do it, and, that wears, as we point out in the film, on a marriage, and he's pulled in. He couldn't say no to anything. He'd play in your backyard if you asked him. He came to high schools and colleges, and that's
Right.
and he would do concerts and give half his concerts away. I mean, it was tough on a marriage and everything. It wasn't perfect, but they were, at the time of his death, everything was coming to a head. His music career was like, hey buddy, you got to get back to playing music. The hell with all this philanthropy, and you can build your philanthropy based on your music career. And he had his desire to help people, Bill Ayers and Why Hunger, and he had his kids and his wife, and he's being torn in every direction, so he wasn't perfect.
Did you ever imagine and think about it when you're putting this movie together, how tough it might have been on him? Because not only he took in, he had obviously was a stepfather too at the same time. He just like, and the money free flowing. And it said, I read a quote somewhere. It said, they asked him about money. He said, money's for the people, not for saving. It's just like unbelievable things like that. Did you ever think that maybe being kind of so giving and so selfless could wear you out as a person, that you're just like really saying yes to everyone out of the goodness of your heart, and sometimes not even looking out for yourself and well-being,
Well, that was the issue. Billy Joel says it in the film. I don't know if we kept it in there, but Billy Joel told us that, he warned Harry about this excess travel. He says, look, Paul McCartney can do it. He owns his own jet. Right. He same way, but Paul's going to be there for his kids. And he said, but Harry took commercial, it was Allegheny Airlines back then. It was pretty frightening, last chance airline. He's flying around most people would think he would, knowing his schedule, it would have been an airplane crash because he was crazy. But we show at the end of the film that it was wearing on his voice. It was wearing on his relationship at home. He was a great father throughout. And it was wearing on, his music career. So something was coming. It was coming to a head, and then he died.
Yeah, and that's the big question too. Where would this all lead to? That's kind of the mystery. Kind of when we look back at the legacy, of a life ending short, you don't know what direction it would go because of all these kind of factors coming into play too. And that's what makes it also fascinating in that way too. You just don't know if something leads up to something because we never got to see it.
Right. Well, the last question that everyone I interviewed, and like I said before, everyone was amazing, amazing with their time. Pat Benatar and Robert Lamb is the sweetest, nicest guy, and they grew up together, so you get that perspective. But the last question I asked everyone was, we did most of this filming in 2018. So a little bit in 2019. With the last thing I did right before COVID hit was I flew to London to do the Sir Bob Geldof one. But the last question I asked everyone was, what do you think Harry would be doing in this moment? Because Harry lived in the moment. And back then, it was what is happening on the border or whatever, and everyone had a different answer to that. So after we finished the film and we're waiting for, it all happened during COVID. So everyone was trying to figure out what to do. And even before Greenwich took on our distribution, we were thinking, let's turn that question on ourselves. What would Harry do in this moment? So over the course of the last 3 months, we took a lot of the films that we work on, that we were working on prior to Harry. We kind of dropped everything and so, okay, we got to finish this Harry film because he kind of leads the way, right? Because Harry's this great activist. And we were focused on gun violence prevention with Sandy Hook Promise and my friend Mark Barton, John Stewart, and and John Field on the 9/11 rescue and recovery workers who were fighting Congress to get health care, after having toxic diseases, and climate change and all these things. And we said, well, Harry was a documentarian, and he also loved music. So we put together a docu-concert, a benefit docu-concert, because in our opinion, that's what Harry would do. And we found Harry's in it. We show clips of Harry that we didn't put in the film. And we have incredible artists that are artists in today's world. And we're going to make that announcement tomorrow. But it covers all the topics that are important to people your age right now. And we have amazing music artists in this, and it's unique, it's different, and you'll find out about it tomorrow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But so the point is, Harry, the interesting thing about Harry as a subject, as a filmmaker, what makes it unique is that, if Harry was another story where, he's a drunk, he was a drug addict, and Hollywood kind of looks for those stories, you go in loving the person and their music, and you come out like, we don't like making stories like that. And Harry's unique. Harry, there's two stories going on at once. There's his music, and we have 52 songs in the film. And there's this incredible train going at 100 miles an hour trying to save lives around the world.
No question. I mean, that's a movie in itself, the human element of being someone that's selfish. You don't need baggage to make a story compelling. You don't need to overcome things, because I think the rare thing is being such a selfless and quality person that we don't get to see in our everyday lives. People like that, really.
Yeah, empathy, like you can't believe missing. Humility, and what Harry, I think, reminds us of. Bruce Springsteen kind of said in a very Bruce Springsteen way, but he reminds us that there's a messed up world out there.
Yep.
And if you're in doubt, you have to do something. We now have the power. By the way, the name of that docu-concert is called "Do Something and Vote." We all have the power to do something, right? Yep. So, and you just have to understand the reasons why the people that you put in charge of your life have your best interest at heart. And that's the point we make. It's not a political film, piece, the docu-concert. It's, down the road. But it takes away all the noise and says, here are the issues: climate change, racial injustice, and the words and music and performances of incredible music artists, including, Tedeschi Trucks and, people along those lines. So
unbelievable. You're continuing on, which is great. It doesn't stop.
But we got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? And I think the time now is just more fitting than anything. I think the Harry story and life just really perfectly fit in with what we're going on now in the world. And I feel like if he was still alive, he probably would have been known as a musician, as someone that started a musician, but been probably a powerful politician at this point, that like, oh, remember when he used to do music and was a Grammy Award winner? But I think like if this individual had lived out his life, I think it would have definitely just kind of took him into changing the world and becoming a figurehead that people would rally around.
Yeah, the only thing that he may have realized, because I asked that question, it's not in the film, but I asked that question of Senator Leahy. And he said that the way that Washington works, how they make the pork, so to speak, is how they say it, would drive Harry crazy. And I can see that. I think Harry would have been more effective on the outside. However, I think in this moment, I think Harry would get involved with politics because he sees how bad how off course it is. You know,
And he was way ahead of his time. I mean, I think in
Right.
today's society with kind of the youth and everything, he would have a really big backing and a voice, you know, a voice that would transcend and people's understanding. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you.
unbelievable. Well, awesome work on the film. I mean, I learned a ton,
Thank you.
really. I was aware of Harry's music and I heard his songs. I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize, but man, I did not know the individual that he was. And that was far more impressive than the music, which is impressive in itself. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Well, I've got friends of mine who grew up in the same town I grew up with who thinks that Cats in the Cradle was done by Cat Stevens. So, and had no idea about his humanitarian work, but you know.
awesome job. Awesome job, Rick. I'm
Okay.
looking forward to hearing tomorrow's news. And I think that's going to be another timely, powerful thing that you're going to have.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day for me and speaking about this.
My pleasure. Thanks
Take
for
care,
having me.
Rick.
Take care.
Bye-bye.